Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Before we jump into everything, I want a quick shout out to our good friends, local 1220 IBEW out in Chicago. Our friends listening on WCPT 820 out in Chicago. Good on our listeners for making those phone calls, making it a little uncomfortable on the folks over at WTTW TV. A tentative agreement has been reached. Ratification votes coming, I guess, in the next day or so. We'll have better news. We'll have news then. But as of now, tentative agreement. Strike is going to come hopefully to an end, and hopefully the workers get what it is they were on the picket line fighting for, the dignity and respect that they earn. So good on John Rizzo and the folks there with IBEW Local 1220. Just wanted to get that out. And a quick shout out to our listeners out on AM 820 WCPT there in Chicago. Shows the power of our listeners to get involved and to take actions. Thanks so much for making those. So, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the world, we're really in a very interesting moment. It goes back to, the old labor frame, which side are you on? Because politically right now, it is very clear. 5 years, 10 years ago, you go, well, both political parties, they're exactly the same. You could have made an argument. Not right now. Right now, you've got the conservative Republican zealotry crowd really on a fringe. And there is a huge difference between the narrow-minded conservative vision for this country and our working class vision. And I think we saw that during the hearing of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. I think I think they showed themselves. I think they really, and they were unabashed about it. They came out and talked about that, they thought that the decision on Roe was wrong, and the decision in Griswold about contraception was wrong. And, well, they have this narrow-minded view of what families are. And yet, remember, these are the people who tell you that they're the party of family values, yet they want to define what a family is and what a family should be and how they should act. Basically saying, if you're not doing what we're doing, you're wrong. While telling us, and this is the brilliant part, while telling us we're going to get government out of your life. We want smaller, less intrusive government. And again, I go back to this family values thing, this decency thing. And the thing in Tennessee has just got my attention. Because, when people tell you who they are, the old Maya Angelou quote, when people tell you who they are, believe them. I've always believed the people who tell you who they are, that's who they are. And I look at what they're doing in Tennessee as right now. The Republicans in that state are trying to eliminate the age requirement for marriage. A couple of years ago, they went and they changed that. You had a Republican governor who said, no, this is a little creepy. Maybe we should be protecting teenage girls. Maybe shouldn't do it. Now, understand, the legislature there in Tennessee is moving this legislation along as we speak, while the Republican megaphone, while the chaos merchants and the outraged candy factory is tweeting out pedophile and groomers and projecting like at no other time. Because it's those Democrats. And what they're doing, understand, they're pushing back against, Transgender Visibility Day, because they're mocking people who are living their lives. And I would go a step further. I think this is part of this bigger plan. This bigger plan to talk to the radical fringe of the party. Look, the Republicans have always had that crazy base. And they've always whistled at them and always, thrown them a wink and a nod every once in a while. Never wrapped their arms around and fully embraced them until recently. Now they are full on nuts. And QAnon and the Q kookery that you would expect to be on the distance is front and center. And this is a big part of that. So this isn't just about, hey, we're concerned about, what's happening with teenagers and, maybe they're going to make a bad choice, because we can have that conversation if you have to. If you really cared, and if you really cared, you wouldn't want a government policy telling what families have to do. You would want families to be able to make those decisions and give them the resources to work their way through and make actual informed decisions, which, look, nobody's jumping into this. But I look at this and I think a bigger part of this is about activating the crazy base into the next step. Not just tweeting, not just making angry statements, but actual engagement, actual physical violence. I fear that they're attempting to intimidate Judge Brown Jackson. I believe that this is a massive intimidation tactic. Now, what's interesting to me is, again, that projection. And we see this a lot out of the GOP. When they're doing stuff, they're claiming everybody else is doing it. And this is basic humanity. When you think about it, you go, who are the true pedophiles and groomers? Well, it's been the Republicans historically. I mean, Trump in his association with Jeffrey Epstein, and you go, yeah, but all these other, everybody. So you can't just go, it's the Democrats. It's a lot of people. And we should be weeding them out and dealing with the actual problem. But just saying, no, I had an email today from a guy who said, well, we're just saying it because it makes Democrats mad. So you're lying and defaming and cheapening for political points. And that's the answer, yeah. When there really are sexual abusers out there. I look at someone like Jim Jordan, who has covered up tons of sexual abuse while he was at Ohio State. I look at Matt Gaetz, who's accused of trafficking underage girls. We're not seeing much on that. I look at Ted Cruz, who's been taking photographs with a convicted child molester. I look at Roy Moore, who got banned from a shopping mall, going after teenage girls. Look at Mike Huckabee defending child molesters. Denny freaking Hastert, former Speaker of the House. Do you need any more? The Schmuck Dynasty guy. Telling the Christian, the Christian getaway folks, you should be marrying 15 or 16-year-old girls because they can pluck ducks. What the freaking heck are you? What? And this is okay. This is conservative world, but this is the world that they live in. This is God-fearing country. This is evidently what they believe. This is what they believe. This is the scary stuff. They want to make these beliefs, these twisted, bizarre, goofy beliefs. They want to turn this into legislation that the rest of us are forced to follow. Remember, same people who say, get government out of my life. We want smaller, less intrusive government for me. But for you, we're going to tell you and your family what you have to do. That's today's conservative movement. That's today's Republican Party. Now, I used to have some respect for old school conservatives who truly believed in smaller, less intrusive government. I used to have real respect for conservatives who believed in institutions, who didn't allow the state to have this kind of dictatorial, authoritarian power. I used to have respect for them. But these folks now who are using the states as the bludgeon instead of the safeguard, that's pure danger, folks. And these folks they're purely dangerous. I look at the fact that yesterday, and this is the scary part, you go, but they just have a different vision. Yeah, they do have a different vision. 63 of them voted against a resolution reaffirming our support for NATO. 63 of them. 63 of them voted against a resolution that urges our continued support, our unwavering support of Ukraine. as these people are fighting for their freedom, fighting for their sovereignty, fighting for their territorial integrity, their democratic future. 63 Republicans voted with Putin. And that's what this vote is. It's a vote with Putin. It was very simple. We support NATO. We support Ukraine. We support our president in his fight to help support NATO and Ukraine. And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. Now you go, but Rick, the base, it's all because of the Q. And this is partially true. Partially, I agree. The base, the tail is wagging the dog at this moment. The radical fringe that they've been courting and wrapping their arms around and doing whatever it is that kooks do in the closet. Yeah, they're afraid of them. And I'm hoping at some point they have the courage to stand up and say, you know what, we've got to roll this back for the good of our nation. Now, you and me and the rest of us, the sane, the rational, we've now more than ever got to come together and go, what kind of a country do we want? Do we want a country where this radical fringe dominates policy, dominates the future, dominates what conditions our children are going to live under, what future we're going to hand off to the next generation and the generation after that? I hope not. And this is why, while we still can resolve to register and vote, and everybody look, I'm reaching out to my sane, rational Republicans. If you're still out there, if you haven't been completely brainwashed by the F channel and all of the right-wing propaganda, if you haven't been completely scrubbed of any critical thinking skill, look at how far from the party of Lincoln, how far from the party of Reagan, the party of Trump has veered from sanity. And ask yourself, is this what we want? Is this the future of the country that we want to move for our children? I mean, it's incredible to me. There was a Senate candidate in Ohio that his name is Mike Gibbons. And Mike had an interesting statement. And I believe it was focused. I believe they sat and they thought this out. This wasn't just an off-the-cuff kind of quip. I believe he thought this out. I believe they knew exactly who they were talking to. He said, diversity, equity, and inclusion are not American principles. And I got to tell you, I grew up believing, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The man should be, tested by his character, not by the color of his skin. Those kind of things, that the high ideal stuff. That anyone could come to this country and work hard, play by the rules, and succeed, no matter your race, your religion, no matter what. And yet, Mike here, not just dog whistling, I would argue bullhorning to the base. Because they want the kind of destructive policy that's moved us forward. Now, personally, I want that vision of America that I was sold. That if you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. That meritocracy, that anyone can pull themselves up and do better. That you can lead a better life. You can go as far as your work ethic and your talents and your will take you. But sadly, we know that's not reality. And I want politicians who are going to fight for me, fight for things that are going to move us in the right direction. And thank goodness for Joe Biden, who today signed the Postal Reform Act that's going to make sure that our post office is going to be secure and in place for the next generation. Because we saw the last administration do what they can to destroy it. The fact that Joe Biden today stood up and said, you know what? There shouldn't be no intimidation in the workplace when workers want to join unions. There should be no coercion, no threats, no anti-union propaganda. He said, every worker should be free should have a free and fair choice to join a union. No employer can take that away. That's the kind of president I want. That's the kind of place I want. As he talked about, hey, that's how we build a prosperous working class. That's how we improve benefits. That's how we have safer, healthier workplaces. But instead, what do we got? We got conservative world, where workers continue to struggle and fight and fall behind. While our CEOs, and I love this story because it just infuriates me. I had never heard of Roblox until today, but evidently they did an IPO back in March of 21. That, big initial public offering, huge thing. The stock now is down 30% off of that IPO, and its CEO has done very well. Thank you very much. In fact, he pocketed a cool $232.8 million for the year. Now, he's in that place that, Joe Biden has said, hey, we need to be taxing these people who are making over $100 million. He's one of those. In fact, there have been a couple of them in the $200 million club. Discovery CEO David Zaslav, he made $246 million. Amazon's Andy Jassy, $212 million. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick, $200 million, even though they laid off 50 employees. There's a bunch of these guys out there who I'm sure aren't paying the same tax rate that their workers are paying. But this guy at Roblox, this David Baszucki, $232.8 million in it for a company that has lost 30% of its stock, yet he makes over almost 1,700 times what the average worker makes. That ain't the vision for this country that I have. I'd like to see it back to where it was when my grandparents were around, where he'd be making, 20, 30 times, not 1,700. But that's just me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or share your thoughts, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Take the program on the go wherever you go and never miss a moment. Make sure you share with your friends. Always there whenever you need it. Right back. Stick around.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The world is watching as Vladimir Putin uses oil to fund his war in Ukraine. Tragically, we've seen this before. If we rely on foreign dictators and fossil fuels, this cycle will only continue. Starting now, let's decide who makes our energy. By investing in more clean energy right here in America, we can cut off the power of tyrants. Renewable, clean energy. That's real American energy independence.
Over 70 years of experience in heart and aviation, the members of the Association of Flight Attendants know the realities of the aircraft cabin better than anyone. We don't just serve drinks, we save lives. We don't just negotiate contracts, we move major policy issues like the smoking ban, no knives on planes, clean water, and safe food on board. The air we breathe matters, and we stop the spraying of poisonous pesticides. Training, rest, and no calls on planes matter as we fight fires, de-escalate conflict, revive, and breathe life. We safely usher passengers to the big business deal, the family vacation, the times of celebration, times of grief, and times of battle. We are aviation's first responders, and we are the last line of defense in aviation security. We are the first impression and the smile of aviation, connecting the people of our nations. Fly with us, partner with us, make progress with us. The Association of Flight Attendants. Stronger together, better together.
I took 2 years of electric in high school, and I was the only girl in the class there. Here, I'm the only girl as far as installers go. I'm a single mom, too. I joined the union because it gave me options for health care and life insurance so that I know my son's taken care of. I like what I do. Like, this is the best job I've ever had. You think solar panels is more like California. You wouldn't think Appalachia would have any. It would be smart if the government would invest more in clean energy resources.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we said the other day, there's a Fox, a study out on the Fox channel, and they paid a bunch of people to watch CNN, and what they found is the more people watch CNN, the more informed they were, and the less likely they were to believe lies and BS. Gee, who would have thunk it? Oh, I don't know. Any sane, rational person? But now there are the studies out there to prove it. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how are you today?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
I am good. What's on your mind?
Well, you were talking about Tennessee, and I have a friend that lives in Tennessee. She moved from our area about 15 years ago, and she has become brainwashed. So I think Tennessee has really gone over the edge. But they're not the only state that has these child marriage laws. Kentucky does.
Yep.
It's totally insane because on one hand you're going, no, wait a minute. What's the difference between, what is the definition here of child marriage according to y'all, and I'm talking about the Republicans, and what is your definition of being a pedophile when you have someone marrying a child that's not even 18? So, I mean, they can't even get their definitions straight. It's insane. And, historically, if we go back, because, I've been working on the family tree and stuff, but regardless, historically, in England and other nations, it was fine to marry a young girl, 10 or 12 years old, and, we've all heard the saying from these, what do I want to call them, from these conservative folks, that some of the ones that are a little bit crude, they'll say, well, if they bleed, they're old enough to breed.
Our moral leaders.
Yeah, and it's like, seriously, I don't want to live back in the 1300s. This is the 21st century here, and could y'all just keep your weird nonsense to yourself? Because but I think the big thing is, Rick, we, the normal people, we are tired of, the past 7 years, since 2015, it's been one outrage after the other. And I think we're just at the breaking point where we're all going, you know what, I'm just tired right now.
Yeah. No, we're tired, but I hope at some point we take that tired and anger and we go to the ballot polls and we throw these bums out.
Well, that's what we're going to have to do. And I think what usually happens is once I think the old saying, once you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, then everyone just kind of goes, okay, I've had enough. And I think that's what's going to happen. But you have a good evening.
Thank you, Alice. I appreciate it. I hope it doesn't. Look, I hope conservatives, and the reason I bring this up, I hope there are Republicans out there who look at their party and go, yeah, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. This is too, I'm tired of holding my nose. Too far, too fast, too much. Because look, and this is one of those religious zealotry things. Look, I don't have a problem with good, decent, honest religious people. It's these people who go just a bit way too far. You think about, I was just talking about David Koresh earlier with a friend. I'm going, it was really, all of that stuff was about, worship me, be wonder I'm the savior, and give me your children to have sex with. This is the weirdness of this whole cult kind of mentality. It always does. It always comes back to this. And it's not surprising to me one bit that this is part of the conservative agenda, that this is part of the move towards silencing women, making them desperate and dependent, and silencing workers and silencing a workers' movement. The reason the labor movement has to be destroyed by conservatives is because that's how you That's how you fight for democracy. You fight for democracy in the workplace, and when you have it in the workplace, you demand it in society. And that, my friends, that's why they get to destroy it. It is that simple. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. It is available wherever you get your podcast, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, everywhere in between, wherever you get yours. Also right there at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on social media, Twitter at Rick Smith Show, Facebook, YouTube, all of the sites. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1882. That was the day trade union leader and suffragist Rose Schneiderman was born. She arrived from Poland and settled in New York City with her family as a child. Her father died soon after, and Rose entered the workforce at the age of 13. She sewed caps and organized with the United Cloth and Cap Makers. Rose became a chief organizer with the New York Women's Trade Union League and played a prominent role in the 1909 uprising of the 20,000. While touring Ohio to rally support for women's suffrage in 1912, Schneiderman said, "What the women who labor wants is the right to live, not simply exist. The right to life as the rich woman has the right to life, and the sun and music and art. You have nothing that the humblest worker has not a right to have also. The worker must have bread, but she must have roses too." She grew frustrated with the privileged middle-class women of the New York Women's Trade Union League and began organizing with the ILGWU. But she soon quit, aggravated by the leadership's indifference towards organizing women workers. Schneiderman devoted her energies to women's suffrage. She would soon return to the Women's Trade Union League. By 1926, she served as its national president and became close friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. President Franklin Roosevelt appointed her to the National Advisory Board, where she wrote NRA codes for industries with women workers. Labor historian Annalise Orleck noted Schneiderman attacked sexual segregation in the workplace, tried to unionize women, called for state regulations of working conditions. She argued for comparable worth laws, government-funded childcare, and maternity insurance. Those ideas and dreams are the legacy of Rose Schneiderman. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage was real difficult to make a living. Then the Teamsters pushed a law so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind. The union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Howdy ho, folks. Howdy ho. Howdy ho, America and points beyond. Who has power and what are they doing with it? Politics is not a natural act.
That's right.
That's right.
I must admit, I never heard that one from you, Tom.
There's so many feisty fighters against the greedheads and boneheads. So grab a libation, join the conversation. It's the personal side of politics, and it is surprisingly tasty.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you got to get a kick out of what's going on in Ohio. I mean, the Senate race is an absolute, let's just say it's a mess. FCC regulations do not allow me to say what I really believe of the giant show that's going on there. But Mike Gibbons, one of the candidates there in the Ohio Senate race on the Republican side, said that diversity, equity, and inclusion are not American principles. And I got to go, there's that big green thing out in the Hudson River. Is got the woman with the stick with the thing that's supposed to be, what they call her, Lady Liberty or something like that? Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Didn't we used to believe something along? Couldn't you make the argument that that was about diversity, equity, inclusion on a certain level? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not in Mike Gibbons' world. Maybe not in the 1% world. And here to share some thoughts on the giant S show that is the Ohio Republican senatorial campaign. And look, the entire the entire election cycle that is going on in Ohio. I've asked David Pepper to come talk with us. David's the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, yeah, I was thinking about that. And Gibbons is famously, I think, quite wealthy, so he also probably doesn't have a lot of quarters hanging around, which all say on them e pluribus unum, which also seems to be an embracing of diversity and a broad group coming together as one. So yeah, it was a bizarre. But by the way, he may be the candidate. He is probably the guy who's got his own lane. He's really keeping separate. So he may end up being a no-name who ends up vaulting into the nomination. We'll see. But he's actually at this point one of the guys tied in the lead. Well, because he doesn't seem, just from being a way outside observer, he doesn't seem like an absolute lunatic. I mean, he seems out there, but Josh Mandel, J.D. Vance. I mean, yeah, come on. He's also self-funding, and he's running a lot of ads where he's talking to the camera. And he comes across as as you said, a conservative business guy who's on the far right. Let's be clear, but he's not he doesn't seem as off the wall as Mandel does right now. But by the way, he has said some really bad things. This will help Tim Ryan in the fall about how it's no big deal when we send Ohio jobs overseas at lower wages. So he's got a lot of juicy quotes from his business time before he ever wanted to be a politician that also could make him quite vulnerable if that ends up being what a lot of the campaign's about. But in the primary, he's actually coming on strong. Yeah, now I look at this quote, this diversity, equity, and inclusion are not American principles. And I believe that this wasn't an oops, this wasn't an accident. I believe this wasn't even dog whistle for the base. This was red meat for the base. This is saying that they're trying to change our America. And this is that flag in the ground that he's staking, saying, no, we're going to go back to the way we used to believe things used to be. I believe this was chosen and this was on purpose. Yeah, and other ads that are up right now from Mandel and Vance literally start off saying they think we're racist, but they literally are all grabbing it at the same dog whistles and blowing them as loudly as they can. So that was a milder form of what we're seeing on TV from J.D. Vance and Josh Mandel right now. Crazy. Now, your state, the Senate race, obviously way off on the fringe, but your entire system seems just completely screwed up. I guess you're going to have two primaries now. And if you have maps yet, do we have maps yet? Are there maps? Let me just say, we are this close to basically no rule of law in Ohio. We have a Supreme Court of Ohio, bipartisan, a lifelong Republican Chief Justice and 3 Democratic endorsed justices who, by that one vote, are clinging to the rule of law in Ohio, because right now the State House and the governor and the Secretary of State have at this point been found to have violated the Constitution 4 times. And my guess is we've been found to violate a 5th time on a map they voted last week. They simply don't care about the Ohio Constitution that 70% of Ohioans voted for to end partisan gerrymandering if it costs them power. So it really is. This was originally about democracy, right? And gerrymandering, get a better democratic system. We're now talking about the basic rule of law because they're defying the Constitution. They are defying the clear orders of a bipartisan Supreme Court. And now they're so mad at the Republican Chief Justice, they're saying they're going to impeach her. So to answer your question, one, it's so lawless it should scare people. We're hanging on by a thread. And the congressional map, due to some timing issues and a technical issue, may end up not being ruled upon until at least the effective ruling is 24, which is a tragedy that they intentionally caused by what they were trying to do, run out the clock. The State House map, and I hope that's not the case, but it could very well be. The State House map is one that I think we still have a very good shot of having a fair map come out of the process. But this is a group of people who decided a year ago, we would rather break the law multiple times, risk the accountability for that, or hope there is no accountability, risk contempt of court. All of that we're willing to do if it means we get to keep power without any fair elections. And in some ways, it's working for them. Now, I hope it doesn't in the end, but so far, it's working in some ways for them.
Well, what is the accountability? I mean, Republicans control the state completely. I mean, even if the Supreme Court says you violated the law, what's the repercussion? I mean, if it's a Republican governor who's supposed to be the one who enforces the law, you've got a Republican Attorney General, Republican Secretary of State, you've got all the Republicans controlling all this. Who actually enforces this if the judge says you broke the law and something needs to be done?
You know, you hope that in the end, and I think the governor himself would hopefully take it seriously. Although, by the way, one other part of the lawlessness is that the governor's son is a justice and refuses to recuse himself in cases where his dad is the defendant. I mean, that's how lawless things are in the wide open. And that's why, you know, if in the end what they're doing succeeds in some way, even if not completely, it's a really scary moment. I mean, voters by more than 70% voted to end partisan gerrymandering, and this group of people in the State House simply cannot let go of it even when the law tells them to. That's getting closer to Orban's Hungary than Ohio's, you know, in America's democracy. So I think in the end, the other thing that's up right now is there are motions filed and debates taking place at the court right now about whether or not these people should be found in contempt of court. But the question again is, okay, great. What sanction is there to them if they're found to be guilty of that? There's another form of law in Ohio called misconduct in office. And that's another thing that I think we should look at, because I was saying this earlier on a podcast. From Donald Trump on down, we have a massive problem in this country of lack of accountability for lawlessness in the political sphere. And what we are seeing play out around the country, including Ohio, is if there is no accountability and they see no accountability, they never stop breaking the law, breaking all norms. So all of us who care about democracy, rule of law, and I'm glad they're pushing forward on contempt of court with these two people in Congress today. I hope DOJ is doing that with Trump. No accountability in the end means they keep going and get more aggressive. They'll move until someone stops them. No, and that's a problem right now in Ohio.
And this is where, you know, I had reached out to a couple of friends in Ohio and say, what do you think of what's going on? Because you're going to have to go to the polls twice. It's going to cost your state millions and millions of dollars that you could use on anything else. Better schools, better roads, you know, healthcare for seniors, whatever. You can throw it in the lake it would still be better spent than this. Right. And they're like, well, you know, Joe Biden stole 2020. So the justification seems to be exactly what you're saying, that they're okay with this kind of lawlessness because they've been sold on this idea, well, so they did it before, so this is our turn. Do you find that to be something that's being used?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a scary moment in our country, in a bellwether state like Ohio, which is right now a bellwether for many bad things. People are literally, and this is true of the Secretary of State of Ohio, by the way. This is true of these state house leaders. They are at the point where they don't fear breaking the law if it serves their quest for power. And by the way, one other thing that's striking about the debate in Ohio, neither the Democrats nor those suing over these maps, not one time have they ever put forward a map that would lead to a majority of Democrats in the State House or Congress. This is a fight over Republicans wanting a map where not one member of their caucus would face a competitive district. So it's not even about control. It's about total lack of accountability. They are willing to break the law 4 times and risk contempt of court. Again, not because they're worried they would lose power to the Democrats, but because they don't want one of their members to have an election where they're not guaranteed victory. I mean, that should scare us. But it also is a really good reminder that what gerrymandering is about is more than control. It's more than having a majority. It's about not wanting to be held accountable, which also allows you to be really, really extreme, really anti-worker, really anti sort of common good, but you get away with it because you're so far from a competitive district. That's what they're fighting so hard for. No. And that's what they've lived, and that's the world they've lived in for the last decade. That's why these states all across this country are getting away. You know, Ohio's not an extreme red state, but we're legislating that way because our districts allow for it. That's the system they're fighting so hard to continue.
No, you're right. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with David Pepper. David's a former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. We can get links out on social media. You can check out his book. Fabulous. I highly suggest it. Now, you brought up, Ohio is not a deep red state. In fact, it's a purple state, I believe. It's a very, most of my friends are Democrats, sometimes flip both sides of the ballot. But sadly, as you've said, they're legislating like a far-right state. And far-right states are bringing the Republican worldview to legislation in ways that are really, really ugly and dangerous. I look at, taking women's rights away. I look at the assaults on workers' rights, and voting rights are being just eviscerated. They're undoing the 20th century, and the 21st doesn't look a whole hell of a lot different than the 18th.
No, it's true. I mean, the reason I call the book Laboratories of Autocracy, it's not some catchy title. They're operating as laboratories. They're operating in conjunction. And so whenever one state does something that succeeds and survives court scrutiny, all the other states do it. If someone, one of the best examples of this, by the way, they also will learn from failure. So when John Kasich and the Republicans here attacked collective bargaining through Senate Bill 5, and included police and fire in that attack in those unions, it failed miserably. So all future attempts to attack collective bargaining in other states did not include police and fire. So it's not as if each state is operating on its own. The right wing has decided, understandably, that the best way to get their entire agenda done, be it economics, taxation, crazy right-wing social views, mostly, by the way, in the minority viewpoint, these views are, the best way to get them done is to ram them through state houses all at once in multiple state houses, as opposed to worrying about getting them done in Congress. That's why Mitch McConnell told Rick Scott to stop talking so loudly. They can get most of their agenda done in states where no one's watching, as opposed to putting it on, Front Street in the Senate.
Yeah. Now, you brought up Rick Scott. I mean, if you look at his plan, extremely crazy and off the fringe. And if most people knew what was actually in it, they'd be running from the Republican Party. Because look, he's calling for a sunset of every federal program in 5 years, which means Granny on Social Security kicked to the curb. Granny, no longer you're going to get Medicare, no Medicaid, no food stamps, no farm bill, none of this stuff, no highway bill for states, no. And the hope that he and others are going to reauthorize this stuff. Are you kidding me? But this is what they're saying. If you listen to the confirmation or the hearings with Ketanji Brown Jackson, talking about undoing the decisions over birth control, over abortion, over it's insane the world that they're talking about bringing us, David.
It is, and that's why the smart ones like Mitch McConnell and the Koch brothers basically say, don't talk about it. We can do this in state houses, which is what they're doing. The main front pushing all this stuff, the attacks on women, the banning books, you name it, the attacks on public schools, privatizing everything. It's almost entirely been done in the state house. Why? One, it gets little attention versus Rick Scott bragging about it. And two, these state houses are so gerrymandered the way we talked about, where not a single member faces a competitive election. Even though these things are deeply unpopular, they could pass them and never lose. One way to think about it, would they be so dead set on gerrymandering if they had confidence that a majority of people agreed with their views? No, they wouldn't need to gerrymander. They would just say, look what we did, reelect us. They know that, I'm sure you have a lot of friends in Ohio with a variety of views on guns, right? 90% of gun owners in Ohioans support background checks. When they get rid of all that stuff, they're with 10% of the people. So the reason they gerrymander is because they can do these deeply unpopular things that represent a deep minority, but they don't worry about getting reelected. You can't do that in Washington. You can't do that as a mayor. But state houses, because of the intense gerrymandering and the ability to cordon off all your members from any election, that's where they do it. So that's why Mitch McConnell says, we don't need to do much in Washington except lower taxes and put judges through, leave most of the dirty and unpopular work to states where no one can no one's paying attention. And even if they figure it out, they can't do anything about it anyway.
That's an excellent point.
The smart ones know, the Koch brothers know that their worldview is unpopular, and that's why they go to states to get it done.
Yeah, and that's why they don't talk a lot. Last question, where do you see this going? I mean, obviously, like I said, you're going to have 2 primaries. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, there will be 2 primaries. It is a total waste of money, tens of millions of dollars. That's all the fault of the legislators and people like Governor DeWine and LaRose, the Secretary of State. The question is, there will be a second primary. My guess is it will be in August. It'll be only the state house members. My hope, and it's a little bit of a long shot at this point, I'm afraid to say, I hope not. My hope is that also has a constitutional congressional map on that primary as well. Getting from here to there is not clear how that would happen yet, but what they have been trying to do literally for a year is to force a primary on an unconstitutional map that violates the Constitution. My view of that, and as a lawyer, is the Constitution is the foundation of your power. If you're elected on a map that's unconstitutional, how are you legally exercising power as a member of Congress? Why are voters stuck in a district that we all know is unconstitutional? So if I were a judge, I would say, and I'm not a judge, but I would say, I don't care when we strike down your map. The moment we strike it down, it means you are not a legitimate member of Congress. So let's get that primary and let's get that congressional map in the August primary as well. They are trying to run the clock out and literally force an election on a map that violates the Constitution. I don't see how that works, but that's their game plan. So a second primary, at least, the question is what will be on that primary ballot.
It'll be interesting to see, and I'm sure you'll come back and let us know. I appreciate the time, Absolutely. David. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Good stuff. David Pepper, former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got any questions, comments, make sure you do that. Also, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there for your entertainment, your enjoyment. You can get that from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, and everywhere in between. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. That was great. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Often, Southern states are the focus of histories of slavery in the United States. But did you know that in the early 1700s, 1 in 5 residents of New York were enslaved Africans? New York merchants had a trading relationship with the Caribbean, which had a large enslaved population. This brought enslaved people to New York. But since there were no large plantations in the colony, most of these enslaved people worked as carpenters, fishermen, or stonemasons. On this day in labor history, the year was 1712. A group of 20 to 70 enslaved Africans armed themselves with guns, swords, and hatchets. They set fire to a building in the center of town, attacking the white settlers who tried to put the fire out. The armed insurrection killed 9 white settlers and injured several more before the militia arrived. As many as 70 enslaved and free black people were arrested for the revolt. Several chose to commit suicide rather than go to trial. More than 20 were executed. Most were hung, and a few were burned at the stake. The revolt resulted in the passage of tougher slave codes. Enslaved people were forbidden from carrying weapons or meeting in groups of 3 or more. Punishments could include whipping. For the next 150 years, this pattern repeated. Slave uprisings in the United States would be followed by brutal repression and a tightening of slave codes. In New York, slavery remained legal until 1799. Even then, New York only adopted an act for the gradual abolition of slavery. This meant that those enslaved before July 4th, 1799 would remain in bondage. Slavery was not fully eradicated in New York until 1841. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
It doesn't happen like we think it does. No one rolls the tanks. No armies meet in pitched battle. It happens quietly, little by little. And because so many think it can't happen, It does happen. Little by little, the rules change. It doesn't seem shocking or sudden. And that's the point. Fewer places to vote, longer lines. Don't worry, they say. We're just improving the system. They hope we won't notice the rules are changing because they lost the last election. They hope we just won't care enough to stop them. They believe they can take America away from us, and we won't even notice. We know who they are. We know what they want. The question is, who are we? Do we let them get away with it, or do we fight? Democracy is on the ballot. Vote while your vote still counts. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, like we were saying, look, Republicans are trying to move this country in their fantasy land, in conservative, crazy, zealot, right-wing fantasy land. And one of the things is, I've been saying this for years, women barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, gays back in the closet, and blacks back in the fields. The original intent, folks. Only white landowning males over 21 being able to vote, the way it used to be. And, the power and control of the handfuls. And, they're really legislatively, as David said, doing everything in their power to move in a direction that in the states, because they're big tenthers, right? States' rights. Pushing bad ideas. And I look at Oklahoma. Their state house on Tuesday just passed overwhelmingly, massively, like 70-14, an anti-abortion bill that would, make it illegal to perform any abortion, any, make it a felony, 10 years in prison. It really is quite amazing what they're doing with this stuff. And there been some stuff, talking about killing people, actually killing people for having an abortion, without the other side of this. Now I've said, look, if you want to make abortion illegal, then how do we encourage people to say, okay, well then, if you're going to make it illegal, how do we take care of those children that you're now forcing to be born? Now, how are you then going to ensure that there isn't the next set of consequences? Don't care. Pro-birth people. It's about punishment. That's what it's about. Because they're also simultaneously, and this is the weird part, they're also simultaneously going after contraception, which is freaking weird to me. Because if you're anti-abortion, wouldn't the best way to stop abortions is stop people from getting pregnant? Just a thought. Also, simultaneously, while we're talking about remaking the country in their conservative, crazy, zealot world, I look at Tennessee, where their state legislature just passed a piece of legislation, I guess, lowering the age of consent to get married. And this is one of those weird things where you go, wait a second. Evidently, they're saying according to the report, it would give an alternative form of marriage to those pastors or other individuals who have an objection to the current pathway to marriage in our law. Because the last governor raised it to a legal age, and they're saying no, you're this isn't right. Now, what's interesting is there is a state senator, a state representative. His name is Rose. John Rose. He was born in 1965, which makes him about 56 years old. Great, interesting story because someone sent the articles. His wife graduated in 2007, which I'd say she was born about, 89, 90? So there's about a 25-year age difference. The difference here, though, is that she was awarded the Rose Scholarship. Yes, while she was in high school, she was awarded the Rose Scholarship, his scholarship. I'm not making this up. That helped her go to college, and I guess there's a picture of her with the governor getting this Rose Scholarship, and there's an article with him, this is the kind of scary, creepy stuff that you go, is this the future? Is this where these people are going to take things? Where now you're talking about trolling grounds for the real groomers. I mean, the right wing is loving to use the word groomer, and they're going, oh, see, the left's. We've got a groomer right here, and yet nobody on the right seems to see the irony in what they're doing. Wow. Like I say, when they're pointing their finger at you, it's because they're doing it. And that's the scary part of what's going on in this country. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share your thoughts. If you miss any of the show, always grab the podcast, share it with your friends and neighbors, coworkers, all of that. It's always available at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you follow us on social media. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.